I am 43 years old. My name is David, and I've spent most of my life dealing with numbers. It sounds boring to some, I'm sure, but to me it's satisfying. I run a business in supply, logistics, and warehousing, a world where order is everything. The ebb and flow of shipments, inventory counts, deadlines, and clients. It's a game of precision, of being 3 steps ahead of what's coming next. It's not glamorous, but it's reliable. And for a man like me, that's what matters. I don't make a fuss about much. I've never been the type to raise my voice or make a scene. My job is to make sure things get done, no matter how chaotic or unpredictable the world around me might be. And I do that well. Every shipment that arrives, every pallet that gets checked off, it all adds up to something stable, something real. Anna, my wife, was always the opposite. We met years ago, during college, when I was already knee-deep in my studies and she was the artist, the one who wandered the halls with paint stains on her hands, talking about her dreams of becoming a designer, of changing the world with her art. She spoke of things like color palettes, textures, the beauty of creating something from nothing. I didn't understand it, not really, but I admired her passion. She used to say I grounded her, that she needed someone like me who could deal with the mundane details while she could focus on the grand vision. I believed that back then, but somewhere along the way, that balance started to shift. The thing about people like Anna is they don't stay grounded for long. It started with little comments, subtle at first. "You're always so busy, David. We're just so different." I thought it was just a phase, a passing thought, but over time I noticed the cracks starting to form. She'd come home late talking about meetings with creative types or designers and how much she had to do. Then there were the parties. She was always getting invited to them now. Parties with people I didn't know, people from the fashion world. I didn't mind at first. I understood her need to socialize, to be part of the scene she was trying to build. But then there were the mornings. I'd wake up and find that she wasn't there. She would say she was out for a meeting, but I started to notice the way her face lit up when she spoke of her new work, new connections, new ideas, new possibilities. The more she talked about it, the more distant she became. And the more distant she became, the less I seemed to matter. She said to me one night, just after dinner, as we sat at our kitchen table, "David, you make me feel invisible." It wasn't said with anger or resentment, but with a strange, detached sadness. It felt like she wasn't just talking about me, but about something deeper, something she could no longer hold on to. I didn't know how to respond to that. I could have gotten angry, I could have shouted or demanded an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, just staring at her, the words hanging between us like a wall. I had learned long ago that making a fuss was never going to change anything. So I just nodded, said nothing. She was right in a way. I wasn't a man who showed a lot of emotion, at least not in the way she wanted. I wasn't the type of man to sweep her off her feet with grand gestures or surprising words. I had always thought that our foundation was solid. We had built a life, a home, a routine. But somewhere, we lost sight of each other. 6 months after that conversation, she told me she had a new job, a brand stylist, or she called it. She was working with a new fashion line, traveling more, attending events, talking about photo shoots, being photographed. I didn't know much about it, but she seemed excited, and for the first time in a long time, she seemed happy. It was hard to argue with that, but in the back of my mind, I knew something was off. She wasn't the same person who had walked into my life all those years ago. A month later, she left. There was no big blowout, no dramatic confrontation. One day, she just didn't come back home. The words were simple, almost rehearsed. "I think we need some time apart, David. I think it's over." And then, like it was nothing, she walked out of the door. I didn't beg her to stay. I didn't chase after her. It wasn't that I didn't care, I did. But I had learned a long time ago that there are things you just can't fix. And some people, no matter how much you want to keep them, slip away. I stayed in our house alone. For the first time in a long time, I had the silence to think. I knew I would need to sign the papers eventually. The divorce was inevitable. But for now, I just let it happen. There were no accusations, No anger, just a strange sense of finality. And in the quiet, I began to realize something I hadn't seen before. The life I had been living wasn't just my life. It had been ours. And now, it was just mine. But Anna wasn't the only one who had changed. So had I. The divorce itself wasn't difficult. The papers were signed without drama, no heated arguments or drawn-out discussions. She moved out of the house and I stayed. There was no need for a confrontation. I wasn't the type to scream or shout when things went wrong. I simply moved forward. It was over, and there was nothing left to say. For the first few weeks, the emptiness of the house felt like a weight pressing down on me. I walked through the rooms, the space that once held the essence of our shared life, and now it was just vacant. I kept the routines though, the work, the logistics, the numbers. Work had always been my escape, and it kept me anchored. But underneath there was a quiet, simmering feeling, something that I hadn't fully acknowledged. Betrayal. I didn't know exactly when or how it happened, but it became clear that she hadn't just left me because we were too different, like she'd claimed. No, it was something else, something more personal. I had my suspicions, a vague unease that was hard to shake off, but I kept it to myself. It didn't take long for me to piece it together, though. About 3 months after the divorce, the news came to me in a quiet, unexpected way. I was scanning the local papers one morning, just looking through the business sections when I saw it. A new fashion showroom had opened, the kind of place with sleek, modern glass walls showcasing high-end collections and exclusive designs. The name on the banner was familiar. Anna. I froze for a moment, staring at the page. My ex-wife had started her own brand, a conceptual fashion line, as she liked to call it. I didn't know much about fashion, but I knew enough to see the signs. She was doing well for herself. They were publishing articles, hosting photo shoots, getting attention. It wasn't just that she had gone into fashion, though. It was the look on her face in the photos that made something cold creep through my chest. She was happy, happier than she had been in a long time. And standing beside her in those images, always just out of focus in the background, was a man, a stylist. I couldn't help it. I knew that man. He was the same person who had been whispering in her ear at those events she started attending. A man named Gabriel, a so-called fashion stylist who had suddenly appeared in her life just before our separation. His presence was never mentioned outright, but I knew enough to recognize the subtle shift in her demeanor, the way she smiled when she spoke about him, the way she seemed excited about working together. It was clear now. He was more than just a professional connection. It stung, but I didn't show it. I didn't confront her about it, and I didn't call her out. There was no need. I simply observed. There was no drama, no emotional outburst, just a calm acceptance of the facts. In the meantime, I kept to myself, watching from a distance as Anna's new life took off. It wasn't just her business that was growing. It was the entire image she was creating. The showroom was buzzing, high-end clients were coming in, and there were events, dinners, and extravagant parties that I was no longer invited to. It was as if I had never existed in her world. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't consumed by vengeance or jealousy. I had a different plan, one that would unfold slowly and quietly. It wasn't about shouting or making a scene. It was about understanding the business she had built, the very same one that had replaced our marriage. I started looking into the logistics behind her business. I knew how things worked, and I knew that fashion didn't exist in a vacuum. For every runway show, every new collection, there was a supply chain, a distribution network. Someone had to move those products from point A to point B, and someone had to pay for it all. I started paying attention to the details. The deliveries for her brand, the ones that came from her suppliers, were routed through a logistics company, a well-known one too. But what caught my attention wasn't the company itself. It was who owned a significant portion of it, a company I had connections to, a company I could easily buy into. And that's when the idea began to form. I wasn't just going to watch from the sidelines anymore. I wasn't just going to let things happen without doing anything about it. If she thought she could build a new life on the back of our old one, then I would find a way to make sure it didn't go as smoothly as she hoped. And so I started making moves, quietly, methodically. I reached out to a couple of partners I had worked with before, people who knew the logistics industry and understood how to navigate the corporate world. We pooled our resources, and over time, I bought out a controlling stake in the logistics company that handled all of her deliveries. The deal was simple, clean. No one knew what was coming. Once I had the shares, I was in control of the warehouse distribution system, and coincidentally, that meant I was now the owner of the very warehouses where Anna's products were stored. The same ones that held her collections, her designs, her dreams. I didn't make any public moves. I didn't announce anything. I just watched. And then the interruptions began. It was small at first, a shipment that arrived late, some labeling errors on the boxes, a mix-up with the inventory that caused a few delays. Anna didn't say anything. Neither did her partners. But I knew it was only the beginning. I didn't have to do anything overt. I just controlled the supply chain, made sure there were issues every now and then. Problems with deliveries, mistakes with labeling, inconsistent stock, small things that would cause enough trouble without anyone realizing who was behind it. But I was patient. The wheels were turning, and I wasn't going to stop until everything she built came crashing down. Not with a loud bang, but with a quiet, inevitable collapse. I remained silent, watching the slow unraveling. As the weeks passed, I became more immersed in the process. I wasn't doing anything flashy. There were no confrontations, no public displays of power. It was all calculated, controlled, and quiet. I knew the key to making this work was patience. Fashion was a fast-moving industry, always shifting, always on the verge of the next big thing. But behind the glossy images and sleek collections, there was always one thing that could bring everything to a halt: the supply chain. And that's where I came in. With my growing control over the logistics company, I could manipulate things in subtle ways, just enough to make an impact. I wasn't doing anything illegal or even remotely dishonest. No, I simply made sure that things didn't go as smoothly as they used to. The deliveries were slow, but not so slow that it would raise alarms. The warehouse staff made mistakes with labeling, but not enough to be immediately noticeable. There were small errors with inventory, things that no one would think to question unless they were looking closely. As the disruptions began to pile up, I could see the tension building in Anna's business. The showroom, which had once been a beacon of success, began to look like it was struggling to keep up with the demand. It was subtle at first, just a slight dip in sales, but slowly it became more apparent. Fashion shows were delayed, photo shoots had to be rescheduled, and clients started to notice that things weren't arriving on time. Anna tried to keep up appearances. She was still attending parties, still networking with influential people in the industry, but her focus was slipping. Her mind was preoccupied with the mounting issues behind the scenes. Things she couldn't control, things she couldn't fix without exposing the cracks in her carefully constructed image. I knew it wouldn't be long before she started to feel the pressure, and when she did, I would be waiting. Meanwhile, I continued to work from the shadows. My partners in the logistics company were unaware of my true intentions. They thought I was just another business investor, making moves in an industry I knew well. They had no idea that I was slowly positioning myself to strike a decisive blow. They didn't need to know. I kept it that way, because once things started to unravel, it would be too late to stop it. One day I received a call from the warehouse manager, a man I had never met in person but had spoken with a few times on the phone. He had been working for the logistics company for years, and he knew the system inside and out. He was good at his job, but I had a feeling he might not be aware of what was going on beneath the surface. He told me that there had been another shipment issue, a large one this time. One of the containers meant for Anna's showroom had gone missing, or rather, it was lost during transit. The paperwork was there, the stock was accounted for, but somehow the shipment never made it. I could tell by the way he spoke that he was nervous, almost apologetic. He mentioned it like it was an unfortunate mistake, a minor hiccup that could be fixed with a few phone calls. But I knew this was more than just a hiccup. This was the kind of disruption that could have far-reaching consequences, especially in an industry like fashion, where timing was everything. I told him not to worry about it. I reassured him that these things happen. But in the back of my mind, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The more things went wrong, the closer Anna was to seeing how fragile her empire really was. At the same time, I knew I had to be careful. If the warehouse staff or anyone else started asking too many questions, it could jeopardize everything. So I made sure that any disruptions were handled quietly, out of the spotlight. The goal was never to draw attention to myself. It was to make sure that, over time, Anna's world would begin to fray at the edges, little by little, until it couldn't hold together anymore. The next few weeks were a blur of small incidents, more missed deliveries, more inventory errors. The once seamless operation of Anna's business began to resemble a machine that was slowly losing its gears. Her partners, the ones who had once praised her work and her vision, started to ask questions. They began to worry about the supply chain, about the quality of their products, about the impact these delays were having on their reputation. But Anna, always so quick to deflect, insisted that everything was under control. She wasn't fooling anyone. One day I received an email from one of her associates, a young man who worked closely with her on the design side of the business. He was polite, professional, but there was an undercurrent of frustration in his message. He mentioned that some of the collections had been sitting in storage for weeks, waiting to be shipped. And in the same breath, he wondered if there was anything I could do to help expedite the process. It was an innocent enough request, but I saw it for what it was, a sign that even her own team was starting to lose faith in the operation. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I waited. I wanted to see just how far things would go before the cracks became unavoidably obvious. And sure enough, within days, I received another message, this time from Anna herself. It was short, direct, and to the point. "David, we need to talk." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a moment to reflect. This was it. This was the moment when everything would come to light. But I had no intention of rushing in. There was no need to make a scene. Instead, I simply waited, knowing that the next move would be mine to make. Things were about to get very interesting. A few days passed, and I received the call I had been expecting. It wasn't a surprise. I knew it was coming sooner or later. Anna wanted to meet. I hadn't seen her much in the past few months. Our lives had grown apart, and although we had once shared everything, now we were practically strangers. The phone call was brief, just a confirmation of time and place. No emotional pleasantries, no small talk. Just the kind of conversation that could have been with a colleague, not someone who had once been my closest companion. We agreed to meet at a cafe, one of those trendy spots she used to frequent with her fashion friends, the ones who would often chat about the latest trends and upcoming events. The same place where she used to tell me about her dreams, dreams that now seemed so distant from the life I was leading. I arrived early. I always preferred to be the first one there. It gave me time to settle in, to get a sense of the surroundings, and to prepare myself. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a carefully orchestrated meeting, one that could change everything. When she walked in, I immediately noticed how different she looked. She had always been attractive, but there was a certain sharpness in her eyes now, an edge that hadn't been there before. She was dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair styled perfectly, as if she had come from some high-profile event. She looked the part of a successful businesswoman, but to me she looked like someone trying too hard to convince herself that everything was fine. She sat down across from me, her eyes scanning me briefly before settling. She didn't speak right away, and neither did I. We both just sat there for a few seconds, allowing the silence to hang in the air. It wasn't awkward. It was just the kind of silence that happens when two people who once knew everything about each other suddenly have nothing to say. Finally, she broke the silence. "David," she said, her voice calm, but with an underlying tension. "I don't know what's going on with the business, but I need to ask you something." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I could tell she was trying to find the right words, but I knew she would eventually get to the point. I've been trying to keep everything together," she said slowly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "But the delays, the mistakes with the shipments, it's starting to get out of hand. People are talking, and I don't know who else to turn to." I could see the frustration in her face, the way her shoulders tensed as she spoke. She was trying to keep her composure, but it was clear she was losing control of the situation. I took a moment before responding. There was no rush. "You know, Anna," I said evenly, my voice calm, "sometimes when things don't go the way we plan, it's because there's a deeper problem. You've been so focused on the outside image, the shows, the parties. You haven't paid attention to the little things, the things that make everything else work. She seemed to bristle at that, but she didn't argue. What do you mean? She asked. I let out a small sigh, leaning back in my chair. You've been too focused on the glamour, the facade. You've ignored the foundation, the supply chain, the logistics, the things that make your business actually function. And now, well, things are starting to fall apart. She shook her head, clearly not understanding. David, what are you trying to say? What does this have to do with you? I paused, considering how much I wanted to reveal. The power was in the mystery, the subtlety, so I kept my cards close to my chest. Anna, I've been paying attention. I've been watching, and I've seen the cracks. And it's funny how things work out. Sometimes when you lose sight of what really matters, the world has a way of showing you the consequences. She didn't like that. Her face hardened and her eyes narrowed. She was trying to stay composed, but I could see the flicker of panic in her gaze. She knew something was off, but she couldn't quite place it. I don't have time for riddles, David, she said, her voice tightening. I need answers, and I need them now. I leaned forward, finally meeting her gaze directly. You've been struggling, Anna, and you can't seem to fix it, can you? Your showroom, the collections, they're falling apart. And the thing is, you don't even know why. You don't know where the problems are coming from. But I do. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She was searching for something to say, some defense, but she couldn't find it. I let the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke again, my voice steady. I've been watching your business for months. Every shipment, every mistake, every delay, it's all connected. The supply chain isn't just a system, it's a foundation. And without a solid foundation, everything crumbles. She was silent now, her lips pressed tightly together as she absorbed what I was saying. I could tell she was trying to piece it together, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an easy answer. Finally, I stood up, looking down at her. Packaging isn't the problem, Anna. It's the contents. And if you're not careful, you might just lose everything because you never bothered to fix what was inside. I turned to leave, but then I stopped, just for a moment. By the way, the warehouse manager's been doing a great job, don't you think? Her face went pale, and I didn't need to see any more to know that the reality had finally hit her. She was no longer in control. I left without another word, and as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. The pieces were in place. The show was over. The final act had begun. 2 months passed. The showroom that Anna and her fashion stylist partner had worked so hard to build, the place where they'd hosted their grand launches with expensive fabrics and elaborate displays, was shuttered. The lights went out, the doors were locked, and the signs were taken down. The collections they had worked so hard to produce were marked down, sold off in clearance sales. There was no fanfare, no last hurrah. Just a quiet, anticlimactic end to what was once a promising venture. I didn't watch it happen, not directly, but I had my sources and I knew exactly when the end was near. The delays had grown more frequent. The errors had piled up. The logistics weren't just failing, they were collapsing. And without a stable supply chain, without solid deliveries and inventory, there was nothing left to support the brand. It was only a matter of time before the truth became impossible to hide. Anna and her partner tried everything to salvage what they could. They even spoke of rebranding, of reinventing the whole concept. But I knew better. Once the foundation crumbles, you can't just paint over the cracks with a fresh coat of gloss. The last I heard from Anna was a brief message, a text actually, which came a week after the showroom had closed its doors for good. I think I made a mistake, it read. Can we talk? I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The time for words had long passed. She'd made her choices, and I had made mine. She had taken everything from me, but I wasn't the one who had lost. Now it was her turn. In the weeks that followed, I learned that her business partner had gone to Europe. His vacation, as he called it, was another way of saying that he had fled. It wasn't an uncommon response when things go south. Run away, let the dust settle, and maybe when you come back, the world will have moved on. But for Anna, there was no escaping the consequences. I was already one step ahead. The warehouse, the one I'd quietly made my own months ago, was now running smoothly. The chaos that had plagued their shipments had become a thing of the past. No more mislabeling, no more missing deliveries. The efficiency was unmatched. Everything ran like clockwork. The place was a well-oiled machine, and that was the difference. Where they had faltered, I had thrived. Where they had overlooked the details, I had taken control. I wasn't interested in what she had lost. I wasn't seeking any form of vindication from her. My revenge had never been about public displays or emotional confrontations. It was about silent, methodical precision. It was about making sure that everything she had built, the one thing she had clung to after our marriage ended, came crumbling down. And I had succeeded. I didn't see Anna often, but sometimes on the rare occasions I visited the mall or ran errands in town, I would spot her. She didn't see me, though. She had changed. She had lost the air of confidence she once carried, and instead she looked like someone who was just trying to get by. Working in a small clothing department, no longer the center of attention, no longer the woman who had dreamed of becoming a fashion mogul. I saw her once in the same department store, folding clothes in the women's section. She wasn't a manager, just another employee now, doing her best to get through the day. The once glamorous image she had built for herself, the one she paraded in front of everyone, had disappeared. She was just another face in the crowd. We never spoke. I didn't acknowledge her, and neither did she. But there was something satisfying about it. The quiet, cold satisfaction of knowing that her world had collapsed. Not with a loud crash, but with the soft sound of everything crumbling beneath her feet. The very thing she had been so proud of was now a distant memory, and I had been the one to pull the rug out from under her. As for me, life continued on. I had moved on, but there was a sense of peace in knowing that things had played out as they should. I had made my mark, not in some dramatic confrontation, but in a way that was far more fitting for someone like me. Patient, methodical, and calculated. The warehouse, the supply chain, the logistics, they were all mine now. I was at the helm of a business that was thriving, with no interruptions, no distractions. The world had moved on, and I was still here. The patterns of success and order had resumed, and in a way they had come full circle. The chaos I had inherited, the chaos that was Anna's downfall, had been replaced by something clean, something organized. The fashionable things came and went. Trends rose and fell, but one thing remained constant: the order I had created. And that, in the end, was the most important thing. I knew there was no need to say anything more. No need for words or confrontations. The story had already been written, and the final chapter had already closed. I didn't need her to understand, and I didn't need her approval. I had done what I needed to do. And in the silence, that was enough.